All right, we're getting pretty close to the end here, but we're gonna add another layer to our resin fish. So just like the first step in all the other ones, we're gonna add our base down. I'm just grabbing some paint. And again, we're gonna go right where the last layer was, except in a little bit. So let me make sure you guys can see that on camera. You can. So I'm just gonna mark out where that's gonna be. It's gonna be quite small. Oh my gosh, this layer is gonna be real small. Smaller it is means closer to being done we are. All right, and I'm just gonna soften it up and move that paint around just a bit. It's very, very warm in this room, so the paint is almost drying right on contact. And just so I remember where things are, let me put a bit of white down too. Just so I know where the white's gonna go. I didn't mean to put that white dot right in the middle. Let me go ahead and cover that. Don't want too much texture, but let's see if we can move this around just a bit without erasing. Remember, if you want to erase, a wet brush will erase quite easy. All right, let me just soften the edges before that dries too harshly. Just like that. And you can see just how small that layer is. I mean, it is literally very, very thin. I wish I could show you how thin this layer is, but compared to my fingernail, it's about half the width of my fingernail, my pinky finger. So that's very, very, very small, which is nice. It means we're close to being finished. All right, but we're still gonna add some more baby fish. Best part. All right, so I'm looking where I'm gonna add some baby fish. Oh, I kind of want something over here. You can kind of see that. All right, yeah, that's a good place for a baby fish. How about I make this one a little swirly like that? Real cute. All right, I'm thinking we need another baby fish after that one. That one's not enough for this layer. Let's add a small one. I know last time I was talking about adding a small one in this particular area over here. So I think that's what we're finally gonna do. So let's see if I can do this. Let's do a small baby fish right here. So this baby fish is actually gonna be obviously swimming quite a bit. Oof, my hand is shaking. Quite a bit higher than the main fish, which is nice because that means more depth. All right, and let me just wipe off that edge here. Remember to erase, you just wet your brush and erase. And if it doesn't come off too well, use a paper towel. I'm just using paper towel to remove the wet residue here. Just like that. And now we've got a start of the baby fish right there. We don't have any high up baby fish in this area over here. So let's fix that by adding one right now. And the baby fish, I'm not using a reference or anything for the baby fish, so they're not very detailed. They're essentially just shaped like tadpole things with a little bit of a bulbous body and then a tail. Get smaller at the tail, and then we add the details to the tail a little bit later. I think that's as many baby fish as I'm willing to add right now on this layer. How about we do kind of an easy layer, and then next layer, let's add some more baby fish. All right, I think that's a good idea. And I'm just checking to see what baby fish are very close to the surface right now. You can do that by touching your paintbrush to the baby fish. This one's very, very close to the surface, so I bet you we can add a second layer to this one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a little bit of orange paint and just add like a little bit of a dorsal fin area, some scales on this guy right there, real cute. Makes it pop up just a bit more. And we can do it to this one. Oh, no, we can't See, I need to double check to make sure that the fish that I'm painting on top of isn't so far down. It's kind of hard to tell the depth sometimes. Let me just wipe that off. Really easy to erase with resin. Here, this one's real close to the surface. How about we add a little bit of texture to this one, a little bit of scale detail, what it looks like. Maybe some eyelid area, dorsal fin action, awesome stuff. All right, did I add to this one already? No, I don't think I did yet. Let me add to this one right here. Just like that. Sorry, my phone's going off. Alright, and a little bit, nope, not that one. I really need to check how deep some of these fish are, because you don't want like a layer of a baby fish and then nothing and then a top layer of the baby fish. That would be no good. I have some dried paint, it looks like, that didn't quite set right, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more to my fish here. And I want the edges to be soft, but I definitely don't want anything in the middle to be gone, just like that. That layer is gonna be so thin. We're gonna figure out in just a minute if we're gonna do a dorsal fin, maybe in the next couple layers. Maybe I'll paint one and then see if it looks good, and if it does, we'll cast it in resin, and if it doesn't, we'll wipe it off with a paper towel. It is so easy to erase on resin. You just have to make sure that the resin is completely dry. Don't try to do it if the resin is not dry. Alright, so what I'm doing now is I'm just gonna grab kind of a darker color. And this darker color is gonna be the background of our fins on our large fish here. Once I get the color going. Mixing some copper with some orange with a touch of black, like a little tiny touch, like I just dipped my brush in it for a second. I've got a nice warm orangey brown. And what I'm going to do with this, let me grab some water on the brush. I don't want it to be so thick and globby with paint here. Oh, and let me actually grab my thin brush for this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do tiny little U shapes with the dark color. Let's see if we could do this a little bit better than I did last layer. Okay. It's got a nice amount of color on my brush. Oof. I want my brush to be super thin for this. I'm just gonna create little U's. Oh my gosh, look at how small this layer is. I can only do about 2 rows of what's the word for it? 2 rows of scales. That's it. All right, we're gonna let that dry for a second before we add the little bit of gold and a little bit of orange. And let's go back to the baby fish and add some tails and fins. All right, so we're back on our baby fish, and I'm just gonna add little details of tails. I want it to be slightly transparent, not completely transparent, but slightly transparent. I don't know if you guys can see what I'm painting right now. Barely. Let me move that back a little bit. Just like that. To make it a little bit more transparent, I'm mixing the color with a lot of water. Make it a little bit more transparent. And again, things become more transparent when you put resin over them. So you do want to make sure that you're not doing it too transparent. I can't tell you how much to make it transparent because I'm no good at that aspect either. Alright, and let's add a tail to this guy. Oof, I'm gonna need to erase a little bit on this one's tail. It's kind of got a chunky tail. Little chunky tail action going on over here. So to erase, I'm just adding some water and moving that paint around into shape, just like that. Alright, that's looking pretty good. We got some tails on some of those baby fish, and this is looking dry, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some scales to it, and I'm gonna mix some gold, some orange, mostly orange, and yellow to create a nice vibrant scale for the top. And we're gonna more of dot it rather than U, and we're gonna dot it right on top of every single U going down. Just like that. And I think our white needs to be a nice vibrant white, so let's add a little bit of a dot of white. I think we need one more white. Alright, and I think we need a white on this side too. That needs to be a bit thicker. There we go. Alright, and when we're painting the big fish, we want to turn and make sure it looks good from all angles. So far, not bad. Almost feel like it needs a bit of a bright punch of orange in the middle, like a scale right here of bright orange. Otherwise, the sides are looking good. That's looking pretty good. Alright, let's go ahead and add some details to our small baby fish. I think I'll add a couple eyes, make it so they can see. I'm just mixing to make a brown right now. And we're gonna add just tiny little dots to the eyes. Oof, that one's a bit googly eye-y. And then this one. That one's also a bit googly eye. We're gonna have to add eyelids to these ones for sure. Alright, so that is looking pretty good. We've got our eyeballs on our baby fish. Let's add a little bit of detail to our baby fish. So I'm gonna grab that brown that I made before for the big fish. And I'm gonna make it a bit opaque using a bit of water. Add a little bit of orange to it so it's not as dark. I don't want the baby fish to be at all dark or too detailed. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add a little bit of detail and texture to some of these baby fish. I can't really make U shapes this small, but I can kind of do just little impressions of what would be a shadow on a scale. Oof, that's a lot. Just like that. I think I needed to go just a touch darker. Not much though. How's that? Yeah, that's a ticket right there. And we're just gonna add that on top of all of our baby fish, just little impressions. Not a lot, just a bit. I used a lot right here, so I'm just gonna wipe some of that up using a dry brush. So grab some of that watery paint back up. Do that on this one too. And this one's okay. I think it actually can use a little bit of darkness. Let's add the darkness in. Especially right on that tail. Alright, that's looking pretty decent. Now, before we add any more details to them, let's go back to the big fish. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to soften some of those edges before it drives me mental. Again, we want to make it so all the edges are so soft. You can't really see at first glance where one layer starts and one layer ends. You need to really observe it, shine a light on it, check where the shadows are going. We don't want anything too spectacular. That's a little bit softer, a little bit nicer. Okay. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let me make sure that this is focusing. Oof. I hope that still focuses even though I've lost a... There we go. That works. All right. I'm gonna go back in with a bit of dark and just create some U-shapes again because I think I lost a few. Adding the orange in. Again, the higher up you go, the higher layers, they all need a little bit more detail. Still soft edges. Just a touch more detail though. Those bottom layers, can't see any of those bottom layers, can you? So it doesn't matter. Oh, actually, is that in focus? Hold on, let me get you guys in focus. Huzzah! For the first time ever, I've been able to actually focus on the paint. Usually my camera says, I do not understand what you're trying to make me focus on. I don't see what you're looking at. But this one worked. All right, I'm gonna soften the edges, but maybe I should wait for that to dry just a bit more. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of pop of color back in again after that. But let's go ahead and add our pop of color back into our baby fish. And to do that, I want yellow, I want orange, and I definitely want some gold. Again, I think I said this on every single part, but I add gold sparkle, gold metallic sparkle to these fins. I don't, it's not necessary, it's not realistic. I love it though, so that's what I'm doing. However, it's not something you need to do, especially if you're going for realism. Add a little bit of gold back in there. I think I need to wipe some of this off because it's looking a little bit yellow. Less gold, more yellow. And I definitely want these to be orangey goldfish, not yellowy goldfish. I'm just grabbing some orange and I'm popping it on here. Another thing I'm going to do with the orange is I'm going to put it right on top of these googly eyes that I've got going on. And that's going to help make them not look quite so googly. It looks more like they've got eyelids now, which is good. This one's a bit transparent, this fish over here. I need to add a little bit more to this guy because he's fading away. Our fish is fading away. Alright, and this one too, actually, a little bit too. You don't want to add too much water like I've done and make it so your fish disappear, especially when we put the resin down, because they do get a lot more transparent. Why do I keep wanting to paint that fish? They go a lot more transparent once you put the resin down. You'll notice as you are working and you're wiping away paint and you're doing such a light layer on a certain spot, you'll get like this white. You can actually maybe see a little bit here. You saw it a lot when we did the fins. It's super obvious when we're doing the transparent fins. But that white cast goes away once you put the resin on. It's a bit hard to work with though, because you're looking at this white cast and you don't know what it'll look like until you put the resin down. But usually it's okay. Don't worry too much about it. Don't try to erase the cast so much that you create lines. You're fine. Alright, so I want to make this fish scales a lot more bright. There's a lot of layers of paint going on this guy right here. See, that's a bit too yellow, I feel. Is that coming? That's yellow on camera as well. Isn't that better? Already way better. I'm not really qualified to do a tutorial because I'm almost learning as I'm going along, but I get to do this and then have a time lapse of a fish being created. And it creates quite a cool time lapse, these resin fish paintings. I think the time lapse is my favorite part about actually doing these. And the finished product, of course, but the time lapse is a lot of fun to watch it just kind of come out of nowhere, come out of paint. It's kind of cool. Alright, I'm just gonna soften. I'm gonna put a little bit of orange on top of some of these black specks so we don't have black specks all the way at the top of our fish here. I want texture, I want scales, and I want detail, but I don't want it to be so contrasted. Keep checking the camera to make sure it's looking okay on camera, not just in front of my face, because you guys are looking at a different angle than me. You guys are looking at it from here. I'm looking at it from here. My eyeballs are up here. So I'm looking at it at a completely different angle. I see something different, but if I'm looking at the camera, I can see what you see. Meanwhile, what I see is that. See how different that looks? And how now it looks way different for me on this side, because my camera doesn't show it in high quality when it's running. I know I'm recording at 1080p, but the recording as I see it isn't 1080p until I export it. That's looking pretty good. I don't mind that too much. I'm gonna maybe soften the edges, but let me just step away from the big fish for a second and focus more on the little fish here. Now I want these little fish to be a little detailed, but not too detailed. They're so small. They're so small, they don't need too much detail. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add lots of water to some gold and maybe just add a little bit of interest. Yeah, just like that. A little bit of shiny gold interest. Just like that. And I keep losing my fish here. I don't see where the fish are. There's one. Just like that. Alright, and I'm just gonna kind of drag and soften that edge. I keep saying I want to walk away from this big fish, let it set, and then I keep coming back for more. There's a lot of paint layers on this one. That is not looking bad though, is it? Alright, now I told you guys that this layer was going to be quite quick, and we are pretty much getting close to casting it in resin. I'm just going to go check it one more time, make sure everything's good, and we'll be back with some resin to cast this guy. This probably is our shortest part yet. 1 second. Okay, and like every single part, we're going to mix the resin same way as usual. I'm not doing anything special when it comes to measurements or anything like that. We're just mixing some good old-fashioned resin. I want to just say that the resin that I use, it's usually anything that is crystal clear, anything that comes in 8 to 16 ounces, as in, how should I say, I want 16 ounces total. Usually. That's the best in my opinion. I don't use the droplet hardeners. I use 1-to-1 cast ratio. Anything that mixes 1-to-1. I don't use anything in the tin. I don't use jewelry craft resin. There's stuff that's specific. It's essentially the same thing, but it comes in a super small amount. And it's usually really expensive, even though it's just simple clear resin. So what I do is I look for specifically just clear cast resin, 1-to-1 parts, hardener, and resin. That's what I look for. There are resins that actually cure via blacklight or UV light. I think it's UV light. Those are expensive. They usually come in very small amounts, and if you have it, it's quite cool because you can actually finish a resin painting all in one day because you just cast each layer. I think theoretically you could in one day because you literally just cast each layer and it's fine. But I don't do that. I do 1-to-1. I go the cheap route. I try to find one that doesn't yellow over time, but all of them naturally do. A lot of them say they resist yellowing, but they tend to. This one, for example, it says, you can't read that because it's not focused, but this one says right here, you'll just have to believe me, it says resist yellowing right there. Is that bottle not turning kind of yellow to you though? Yeah, it turns yellow. It's due to when it's exposed to light. So if you do have an art piece that you want to show off, I recommend keeping it out of direct sunlight. It keeps it from yellowing. And if you use a wood or yellow bowl, or even a black one, you don't see the yellowing, so it's fine. Anything with like a texture or color to it, like this yellow bowl, it's great. No issues. Alright, so our resin's essentially ready to pour now. Let me focus, make sure that you can see what I'm doing. Let's see if it actually focuses. Oh, it kind of did. It's focusing right here, so that's what you can see. Let me double check, make sure I don't want to make any changes. I'm looking at all my fish right now, making sure I love my fish, because once we cast it, I can't make any changes. Let me just wipe that a bit, soften that. Yeah, I like these fish. I'm okay with these fish right now. So I think I'm ready to cast it. I don't know if you can see this white cast right here. I want you to watch that if you're able to, as I put the resin down, because you'll see it goes clear. Now I don't know if you caught that on camera, because it's very hard to see on camera, but that white cast goes clear once you put resin down. The tails also go a little bit more transparent, so you can always watch one of the tails as you're pouring to see how transparent it gets. It's quite cool. It's quite a cool thing. And I think in part 1 I go over how to mix resin and pour resin, the kind that I use at least. So if you do need help, or if you ever need a refresher on how to do it, just go back to part 1. I'm just spinning it to make sure that it's nice, and I have a heat gun that I'm just heating up right now. And I'm just going to go over the surface, pop any bubbles. You don't need a heat gun, you can also just pour really slowly and mix your resin very slowly. Prevents bubbles. Alright, and just like that, we're done with this layer, and we're going to wait 24 hours and do the next one. I'll see you then.